And we are live. Welcome to another edition of the PreMarket PulseScan with yours truly, Dex the Algo Capitalist, aka the Vulcan, coming to you live from PulseWaveTrading.com, home of the world famous PulseWave price trigger reports that we place in your hand each and every trading day. All right, so we actually got things to talk about today, and we need to jump right in. So starting first off with the Dow futures, is up 67 points at 28,652. We got the NASDAQ 100 up 21.5 points at 12,115 and a quarter. Even the S&P 500 is up 6.25 points at 3510 and 3/4. Russell My Hustle at 5.1 points at 1639.7. Futures Bitcoin Composite Index up 40 at 11,480. Nat gas is down a whopping 20 cents, trading at $2.64. Crude oil up 65 cents a barrel, trading at $40.85 a barrel. The long bond is up 8.30 seconds at 175 and 14.30 seconds. Gold futures up $17.80 at 1912.50. Silver up 47 at 24.60. And the excuse me. Euro dollar is up 18 at 117.78. Pound sterling up 92 at 130.34. And the Aussie is up 30 at 71.85. US dollar index down 21 pips at 93.32. Soybeans up 5 3/4 points at 10.49 3/4. Corn down 1 3/4 points at 3.89.5. And wheat is down 3.5 at 5.90.5. That is a quick look at the overnight markets. Now, as far as overnight market news, let's see what we got here. A Wall Street chief strategist says U.S. lawmakers need a deal on fiscal aid. Even a small one will help save consumer spending. U.S. lawmakers need to decide on a fiscal stimulus package, even if it's a smaller one, to prop up consumer spending, particularly going into the holiday shopping period. Victoria Fernandez, chief market strategist at Crossmark Global Investments, told CNBC's Trading Nation on Tuesday. Markets expect any COVID-19 vaccine approved this year to only be 50 to 60% effective, according to asset manager Balsany. And he says that the stock markets are currently pricing in chances of any COVID-19 vaccine approved this year to be only 50 to 60% effective, according to Bloomberg Asset Management. And let's see here. Failure to provide more fiscal stimulus is a significant mistake that could cause more businesses to fail, according to Moody's chief economist. Well, isn't that very, very eye-opening? Billionaire investor Howard Marks warns investors should expect the lowest returns in history, and the market is vulnerable to negative surprises. You don't say. Global stocks are mixed this morning. Most Asian stocks closed lower. European stocks are up in the range of 0.1 to 0.5%. And here in the States, futures are up between 0.2 and 0.3%. As far as earnings coming in, we got Goldman Sachs Q3 and United Health Q3 earnings are due. On the economic front, API weekly crude oil stock and U.S. monthly budget statement are due. Well. What do we have here? Well, across the wires this morning, we got a Colorado Democratic Committee member caught on hidden camera talking violent revolution. Yeah, the Democrats are exposed and they don't even care anymore. They don't care that you know what they're up to and what their plans are. They just don't give a darn. More than half of all Americans plan to stockpile food and other essentials for the chaotic months ahead. So the American people, although politically stupid for the most part, are not totally stupid. You know, there was a time when preppers were relentlessly mocked, but nobody is laughing now. What's up with that? Soaring food costs and producer prices higher in September. After 5 straight months of deflation, U.S. producer prices rose year over year in the month of September. Not only that, but then you got the futures markets and global markets totally unsure what to do in the coming weeks with this election coming out, and talks about the vaccine, and we got Brexit. And right now, I told you, markets don't like uncertainty. So they're going to pick a side eventually, and you may not like the side that the markets pick. All right. You may not like it. You may not like it at all. You may not like it at all. All right. And that usually heads in the opposite direction. It usually heads down, and it will do so at a significant rate if there is no clear picture as to what is going on and how to fix it. All right. I'm just saying. So take that for what it is, because at the end of the day, this is all we're left with. Now, some could argue that there's something fundamentally wrong with the dynamic of the market itself. Okay. Some people would say that the traditional protective measures are all but missing in the market. One could argue that the absence of the plunge protection team back in March was a smoking gun piece of evidence to back up that hypothesis. So you understand that the plunge protection team was a type of risk parameter installed to help protect the integrity of the markets. Where was these device to protect the integrity of the markets when the crude oil futures went to a negative 100, which is supposed to be mathematically and physically impossible? Because we're talking about a commodity. Commodities always have intrinsic value. There's no such thing as a commodity having no intrinsic value. To take a commodity futures contract to negative 100 is saying that there is no value. This commodity is no longer valuable. They're saying this is no longer a scarce resource with alternative uses. That's basically what you're saying. So you're making a mockery out of the market. And to me, that was just more flexing coming from those, they, them, that have planned to destroy the United States only to rebuild it even worse than what it ever was. Yeah. So there's some things you need to talk about, some things you need to think about. All right. I want you to think about these things. Just something to think about. Why have they changed both the complexion and the dynamics of the world's financial markets? All right. Why are the guardrails missing from the market? The market guardrails are based on the capabilities of active investors. All right. In 2016, okay, an article was written talking about this dynamic in the market, the passive situation in the market. Quote, passive index strategies are all the rage. Investors desperate for acceptable returns are investing in funds whose value is directly linked to stock market indices. Unlike active funds, index funds do not perform investment analysis and are not looking for sectors or companies that offer greater return potential than the market. They do one thing, and that is replicate a particular equity index. And that is a quote from an article on passive negligence in the market. Now, in 2016, passive index strategies were all the rage. Today, they are the market. Active investors have become endangered species due to poor relative returns and short-term thinking clients. Many active professionals have been forced to become less value and more growth-oriented. Failing to adapt ultimately means business failures as clients flee to the growth passive style. Similarly, most individual active investors have similarly swapped active for passive strategies. All right. Something to think about. All right. The old way of doing things, all the commercials, you saw them talking about, buying and holding and value investing. Your great granddad could buy a stock and hold it until he dies and pass it on to his son, who passes it on to his son, who passes it, that kind of thing. You buy a stock and you forget about it. You put it in a drawer, safe deposit box, and you forget about it. Oh, what's that? Is that a piece? Is that wallpaper? No, that's a stock certificate. Oh, okay. It's worth anything? I don't know. Let's call the brokerage company and find out. That used to be how it was done. Okay. Now, there's something else you need to think about, because there was another quote. In other words, the prices of underlying stocks will increasingly rise and fall together in correlation with the market and not based on their individual merits, end quote. Think about that for a minute. How many years have I been on YouTube talking about the breakdown in market correlations, asset correlations, all but disappearing? Bonds are supposed to move inverse to stocks. Gold is supposed to move inverse to stocks. Bonds and precious metals have always been a store of value and a flight to quality when the stock market is falling. But nowadays, we have bond prices falling, stock prices falling, and precious metals falling, all in unison. I have made many a YouTube video showing in real time as everything on the screen was red. There have been multiple occasions, all right, where the US dollar, stocks, bonds, and precious metals all fell together. There were even times when the US dollar would be falling, and so would commodities falling with the dollar, which are supposed to also have an inverse relationship. When the dollar is falling, it makes the commodities soar, and vice versa. We have seen breakdowns in those correlations as well. The first sign of breaking down of correlations started back in the early 2000s. We started to see those breakdowns and correlations. And I think the watershed event that exposed it on a global basis was the May the 6th of 2010 flash crash, where everything fell together. Everything on the screen was red. I think that was a test run, getting everybody ready for what will be coming in the years ahead. Now, as of September of 2020, year-to-date returns were highest for the largest companies and lowest for the smallest within the S&P 500. Now, the return differentials are stunning. As the saying goes, size matters. It appears that size is all that matters. Okay? Active investors seek out value. While value investing is defined in many ways, it generally means buying assets they deem cheap. Conversely, they tend to sell assets that fulfill their valuation forecasts and become overpriced. Some active investors also short overpriced assets. All right. Now, just think about that. Technically, traditionally, value investors never shorted the market. They tended to employ long-only strategies. So if they deemed an asset that they were long to be overpriced, they would just promptly take profit and sidelines themselves until they could find another play. There were times where they would only make anywhere from 1 to 3 trades a year. That's right. There were investment styles, for lack of a better way to put it, that would only trade maybe 1 to as much as 3 times a year. Not a week, not a month, but a year. And there were multiple occasions where they only made 1 trade per year. All right. And it didn't matter if they were trading forex or commodity futures or stocks. That's how they would do it. And if there was a futures thing that they were in, they would just keep rolling the contracts over, just roll them over. That's how they moved. All right. They traded slowly. They did a lot of research, find something that is undervalued, and then they would buy it. Case in point, they like to look at things that were at historical lows. Like you just hit a new historical low in something that they deemed valuable. Now, back in the day, if you did this in the commodity sector, you could be holding that commodity futures and rolling that contract over for years. Traditionally, commodity futures contracts would stay low and just move sideways at historically low prices for decades. They could do that for decades. And then all of a sudden, you would just have this parabolic move up, which signaled the end of the bear cycle and the beginning of the bull cycle. They would go ahead and buy that. They wait for the first pullback. They would buy it, and then they would hold it, and then they would seek to capture a multi-year move. Now, that is the way that the traditional money managers like to attack and approach the market. However, this was not something that was readily available or easily done by the retail speculator, okay, the retail investor. So companies with the best fundamental ratios had the worst performance when we start looking going back over the last 10 years. From January to September of this year, value was left for dead. The only thing that seems to matter to investors was market cap. Now, these results demonstrate that value investors are not a viable force in the market any longer. The activities of those who are left are being overwhelmed by the growing preference for passive investing. All right. Now, there has been a mass exodus from active to passive strategies over the last 12 years. And there's multiple reasons for that. Okay. Now, here's a more descriptive look at how the traditional role of active investors, how that looked. So consider a simple and somewhat hypothetical case from 2010 to late 2019. Apple's price to earnings ratio was between 10 and 20. Now, in this case, it should be self-evident that active investors might generally view Apple as cheap at $10 and expensive at 20. By contrast, passive investors are indifferent at any PE. PE gyrates in the range and it approaches the bounds. Active managers get involved. The interests provide buying and selling pressure to regulate the range. Active investors have enough market share to uphold the range because, again, you're looking at volume. Obviously, if an order comes across the tape to buy 20,000 shares of Apple versus an order coming across the tape to sell 100, well, you know that market's going to go higher. All right, so if you look at this example, you'll see the active investors may have lost enough market share in 2019 and could not provide their protective services. Now, it is important to note that there is little about Apple's prospects to be giddy about, but their earnings have been flat for the last 5 years. I repeat, Apple's earnings has been flat for the past 5 years. How many new iPhones have come out over the last 5 years? And yet Apple's earnings has remained flat over the past 5 years. Now, in reality, active investors may have many different views and opinions, but they also have different strategies and vastly different evaluations on rich versus cheap. That said, the more active investors they are, the more prices are grounded to historical value norms. Now, in other words, active investors reduce volatility and therefore risk. Active investors are the guardrail. Again, if you have more stable money, propping up a particular stock, meaning that, versus those that are trying to sell it, that's what happens when those short squeezes come in. All right. So this is kind of the give and take that we're seeing right now. And I have to tell you, they want to always blame the speculator when things don't move the way they want them to. But let's not get it twisted. Speculators are the ones providing all the liquidity. No speculator, no liquidity, no market. With this being said, remember I told you some weeks ago, and I showed you examples in the end of day report, how the financial sector has not at all been participating in this historic bull run, and that you can't have a sustainable bull market without the financial sector participating. And when I say financial sector, that particularly means the banks. Banks have to participate. Well, Bank of America's revenue has been tumbling, and trading misses, but earnings beat on plunge in lost reserves. I've showed you the chart of that stock, and it is still on the daily chart been in a bear market, while everything else has been in a bull market. If you look at the financial spider XLF ticker, you'll see that also it has been underperforming. Now, after yesterday's results from JP Morgan and Citi, which initially surprised with the plunge in their Q3 loss provisions, which, however, the banks explained was not due to some optimism over the economy, but merely due to previous over provisions. Today, this trend continued when Bank of America reported their Q3 results, which were generally in line, however, boosted largely by another far lower than expected provision for loan losses. The bank reported that in Q3, revenues tumbled by 11% to $20.3 billion, down from $22.8 billion a year ago. Pressured by low interest rates and missing estimates of $20.8 billion, this resulted in net income of $4.9 billion and adjusted EPS of 51 cents. Also well below last year's $5.8 billion and 56 cents, respectively, but slightly better than the 4.3 billion and EPS of 49 cents expected. Now, according to the bank's presentation, these were the key revenue and net income highlights. The first one was revenue of 20.3 billion declined 11%, driven by lower net interest income and non-interest income. It should be noted here, too, that Bank of America stock at one point in time was a favorite day trading stock. All right. Had a lot of daily large volume. Not so anymore. Net interest income of 10.1 billion, down 7% from the second quarter, driven primarily by lower interest rates as well as lower loan levels. Well, to me, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. The bank offers you zero interest rates on your savings. So how do they expect to go out and achieve higher interest rates than what they are offering you? It's a self-perpetuating situation. They help fight to keep these rates low. And guess what? It's hurting them in the process. Again, unintended consequences. Back in the day, the bank could give you 5% on your savings, and they could easily go out here and get 10 to 14% interest on their investment. And that's how they're able to pay you and still come out ahead. But not so anymore. Where are you going to find the unicorn when interest rates across the board are either zero or negative? Self-perpetuating circumstance of unintended consequences. Sales and trading revenue of 3.2 billion and investment banking fees of 1.8 billion declined from a robust second quarter 2020 levels. Non-interest expenses of 14.4 billion increased $1 billion or 7%, driven by elevated litigation expenses, higher net COVID-19 expenses, and the addition of merchant services expenses. Stop right there. Elevated litigation expenses. See what happens when you look under the hood, ladies and gentlemen? Higher net COVID-19 expenses. Again, unintended consequences. How about provision expense of 1.4 billion declined 3.7 billion? How about included a 0.4 billion net reserve build and allowance for credit losses, and net charge-offs of $1 billion were down 0.2 billion. That's a lot of charge-offs any way you put it. I don't care how you try to make it sound good. That's a lot. That's a lot of charge-offs. Charge-offs are losses, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a nicer, fancier way of saying losses. You took a L. They took an L. They didn't just take an L. They took an L with your money. Those of you that have holdings, investment, interest in Bank of America, which is, in my opinion, one of the shadiest banks of all time. Now, one of the things investors will focus on was Bank of America's warning up top that while consumer spending improved and deposit growth was strong, this is a function of QE now, loan demand weakened and clear confirmation that the U.S. economy remains very sick. Now, don't get it twisted, ladies and gentlemen. Even though we're beating up on Bank of America this morning, make no mistake that banks hire and employ some of the greatest economists who are very good at what they do. Very good at it. You've heard me give you the testimony of the economists that Wells Fargo had at an employee seminar back during the financial crisis of 08. And the projections that they gave was spot on, down to the last 0.1. I've never seen such accurate forecasting in my life. From an econometric model scale, their predictions were spot on, and they were lowballing. And in some cases, it was a lot worse, but they were spot on, man. So for them to come out and pretend like they don't know what's going on, oh, we were caught off guard, we didn't know, that's a lie. An outright lie. They do know. They know way more than what you think. Trust and believe me when I tell you that. They are not fools. All right. They are part of the system. Therefore, they know everything before it happens. They know all the plans. So just remember that. Now, I want you guys to think about what's coming in the near future. And what's coming in the near future is foreclosures like you had never seen before. And I'm talking about residential and commercial. We've talked about it before. And all this is being done, you guys, because this is the great reset that they are talking about and want to interject. All right. They're talking about it. They were talking about it in Davos. All right. G7, G20. They all know what's coming because they're the ones that's making it happen. And they're the engineers of the man-made collapse. It's not an organic collapse. That's why I made my documentary back in 2016 called There Is No Collapse, because it is not an organic collapse, something that, oh my goodness, this just caught everybody about off guard. We weren't thinking or we made a mistake. No, this is not that. This is not something that is, grassroots or organic coming out of the ground. This is a man-made, manufactured crisis for political purposes. You need to understand that going forward. This is a game. It's a plot to take down the United States of America. And it's being allowed to happen. It's being allowed to happen. Anyone who speaks up against it is ostracized. And I can't believe that people actually believe that the American people are just so tired and sick and fed up and now they're protesting. No, these are paid actors who are doing the looting and the vandalism and the murdering of innocent civilians on the street while the states sit back and turn a blind eye, pretend like they don't know what's happening. That's right. These people are paid. The insurrection is well funded. These people have been bussed in. They have buses to bring these people to the locations. They provided bricks at the locations. Everything that the individuals need, they have supplied them. From Europe, the culture war raging in the United States is disturbing. In the presidential election, it seems that radical anti-American forces are questioning the very foundation on which Western civilization was built. The New York Times seems too similar to the propaganda we were fed by the Hungarian Stalinists during the days of the communist tyranny. How are they doing this? Well, you got to start off by contaminating the past. No matter what you thought or how you felt about Alex Jones before he was kicked off of social media, he had got his hands on some footage, video footage of a government training video. I believe it was for the TSA, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. And part of their training process, they were being brainwashed and told that the founding fathers were terrorists. That's right. This is what they were being taught. And this was years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Contaminating the past. In the Western world, the past has become the target of an ideological crusade. Many of its historic monuments and symbols are being vandalized, defaced, or destroyed altogether. In the United States, the national flag has been treated with derision and denounced by leading members of its cultural institutions as a symbol of racism, oppression, and discrimination. Commentators have been regularly condemning their nation's past and portraying it as a source of irredeemable shame. In recent times, hostility towards the very foundation on which different Western nations rest has acquired a systematic form. The trend is most strikingly articulated by the New York Times 1619 Project to devalue and criminalize the founding of the United States. Now, through distorting America's history, this project claims that the year 1619 and not 1776 constitutes the origin of the United States. It was in 1619 that African slaves arrived in Jamestown, and this event has been rebranded as the origins of the U.S. But why? Because the 1619 Project insists that the U.S. was founded for the purpose, again, founded for the purpose of entrenching slaves, and that to this day, the nation is dominated by that legacy. Now, according to this inaccurate version of the past, the American Revolution was not so much a war of independence, but a selfish act of preserving exploitation and oppression. In this way, the contribution of the American Revolution to the development of the Western ideals of individual liberty and personal responsibility is erased from history. America's Declaration of Independence, especially for the time, its remarkably advanced liberal and democratic Constitution and Bill of Rights are implicitly renounced as slave owners' charters. That's right. That's what they're telling you. That's what they want you to believe. but it is a gross misrepresentation of the past. Most significantly, the 1619 Project is designed to contaminate the tradition and foundation that underpins the opportunity and mobility that have come to characterize the American way of life. This attempt to vandalize the tradition of a nation and its historic memory is far more toxic than toppling over a statue. Certainly, one of the main authors of the 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, is in no doubt that her objective was to plunder the past in order to undermine the moral authority of the present. Recently, she responded to critics who claim that she has distorted history by stating on Twitter, quote, "I've always said the 1619 Project is not history. It is a work of journalism that explicitly seeks to challenge the national narrative and therefore national memory. The project has always been as much about the present as it is about the past," end quote. That right there is what we call BS, double talk, double speak. To say that it is not history, but then in your statement by saying it's as much about the present as it is about the past, that's double speak. You just contradicted yourself. You said it's not a work of history, but it is about the past. But you are misrepresenting the past and misstating the past and grossly distorting the past. So it is about the past. All right. No lies of the truth, ladies and gentlemen. No lie is of the truth. Okay. Just saying. You can't make these ridiculous statements where history totally argues against you. The facts argue against you. You can't make these glowing generalizations with no evidence, with no proof. The facts are different than what she is stating. So it is not a narrative. It's a work of fiction. Hannah-Jones's explicit conflation of the present and the past should not be seen as an innocent disregard of fundamental temporal boundaries, but as a project devoted to contaminating the past in order to delegitimate the institutions of the U.S. in the present. Make no mistake that that is exactly what this is about, ladies and gentlemen. It is a script for vandalism of history. Now, the way in which the authors of the 1619 Project attempt to seize control of the national narrative is by providing a simplistic, inaccurate, but highly evocative script for members of the public. It is a script that many protesters, rioters, and looters in the United States have effortlessly internalized. Hannah-Jones has a little inhibition about promoting a script that regards not only the founders of the U.S., but members of the Caucasian race with contempt. As she noted in a 1995 letter to a newspaper, the white race is the biggest murderer, rapist, pillager, and thief of the modern world, end quote. Her reference is not simply to the white people that settled America in the 17th and 18th centuries, she added, quote, "Even today, the descendants of these savage white people pump drugs and guns into the black community, pack black people into the squalor of segregated urban ghettos, and continue to be bloodsuckers in our community," end quote. Let's break that down for a minute. She is saying that the children are responsible for the sins of their fathers, inasmuch as they have perpetuated the sins of their fathers. First of all, what she said is that whole quote is a bigoted statement, and it's also a racist statement. No one nationality of the human race has a monopoly on savagery. All right? Let's not get that twisted. All right? No one nationality of the human race has a monopoly on murdering, raping, pillaging, and plundering. Every nation in the history of the world has had their hand at one point in time in history with raping, pillaging, and murdering. Slavery is dated back to the beginning of human civilization. All nationalities at some point in time has enslaved other nationalities, regardless of the amount of melanin in your skin, regardless of your complexion, whether you be light-skinned or darker complected, it doesn't matter. Savagery goes back to the beginning of human existence because we live in a fallen universe, because man is a sinner. He will always sin. He will always lie, cheat, steal, kill, and destroy because he's a sinner. He is depraved. He is without Christ. He is unregenerated in that state. And as long as a man stays in that state, he will continue to get worse. It is not a matter of complexion or nationality. It is a problem of sin in the human heart, ladies and gentlemen. Make no mistake about it. So the argument is not against lighter skinned, complected peoples. They have done no worse than darker skinned, complected people. Again, she is cherry picking events of the past and not talking about the truth about events from the past. Shall we go there? You said bloodsuckers in the urban community. You said that they continually pump drugs and guns into the black community. Really? You know, the last time I checked, no one can force you to do anything you don't want to do. See, you made fun of Kanye West when he tried to put you on game. When he said, 400 years of slavery, it sounds like that was a choice to me. Let's break that down and think about it. Why couldn't the slaves in the United States uprise like they did down in the islands? They revolted. They were free a lot earlier than the slaves in the U.S. because they revolted. They said, we're not going for this. Sorry, not happening. You only do what you want to do. The reason why they stayed slaves for so long and put up with the abuse for so long is because they were unwilling to die for what they believed. People like Nat Turner said, I'm ready to take up arms, and this is what we're gonna do. Where do you think the spirit of the saying comes from? Better to die on my feet than to live on my knees. What do you think that even means? It means that rather to become subservient and enslaved, I'd rather go down fighting. Better to be dead with my dignity than alive and a slave. A lot of people talk a good game, but they're not really willing to die for what they believe. And that is the difference. People put up with the things that they want to put up. You can't make Black people in the ghetto take drugs. You can't make Black people in the ghetto pack guns and shoot other Black people in the ghetto. You can't make that happen. You can bring all the guns and drugs to a community all you want. It's not going to make the community take those drugs and shoot those guns and guzzle that liquor. All right? Think about that. Just because you pump something somewhere doesn't mean the people are going to want it and take it. That is a poor argument. Because if that was the case, how do you explain all of the immigrants that came through Ellis Island going back 100 years ago? How do you explain how the Irish picked themselves up? How do you explain how the Jews picked themselves up and all the other nationalities that came here? How do you explain that? How do you explain even to this day the immigrants that come to the United States? How do you explain the hardworking Mexican and Latinos that come here and start working hard, and the next thing you know, they got their own businesses? All right? There's something to say about that. They didn't stay in their condition. They either got an education or they went to work. And they build businesses, industries. They don't stay there. All of the people that came through Ellis Island that lived in the ghettos of New York City, in the 5 boroughs, they no longer live there. Those people from 100 years ago moved out. How did they do that? Did they blame the white man for putting them in there? No, they came here through Ellis Island without a penny in their pocket, and they couldn't even speak the language, but yet they went to work and got their hustle on, their grind on. Why do you think there was a period in American history when the textile industry was the thing? It was booming. So you can hate all you want, but when they came here dirt poor, without anything, without nothing, and had to make something of themselves. Yeah, think about that. They sewed. They stayed up all night long sewing and making clothes, and those that were shoemakers were making shoes, whatever industry they were in. That's what they were doing. All right. How do you explain that then? They were in the same country you were in. They were in the same country you were in. How do you explain that? You can't. Now, back then, those people had more argument than you have today, because you grew up with privileges and resources that they didn't have. Take one of the poorest people in any ghetto in the 5 boroughs that live in the hood. You are doing better than they were when they came through Ellis Island 100 years ago. Yeah, you are. They are. You are. How is that? Because you speak the language, number one. You speak the language. You speak English. They didn't. You can read and write. Most of them couldn't. How do you explain yourself? How do you explain yourself? They didn't know the language and they couldn't read and write, man. How do you explain yourself? You have no defense. Even if what she said is true, let's just suppose that it has been a conspiracy by the United States government, and they have been pumping all types of drugs into the Black community, and they've been pumping, not just drugs, but alcohol and guns, so that Black people can shoot themselves and get and be strung out on drugs and overdose. Let's say that was it. Let's just say that was called Operation Killer Ninja. All right? Killer Ninja. Just because that was a true operation doesn't mean it is guaranteed success. Doesn't mean it guarantees success. If that was the case, then there would be more billionaires in the world than there are today. Because all I would have to do is go to the local butcher, say, give me 100 pounds of pork right now. I want bacon, I want ham, I want sausage, I want some scrapple. Just give it to me. I'll take pig feet, pig tongue too. Matter of fact, give me the whole pig. I got me a new hustle today. What you gonna do with all this meat, man? Y'all having some kind of luau or something? Nah, man. This my new hustle. I'm gonna chop this pig up in little pieces, and I'm gonna go sell these pieces for 10 times worth what I just paid you. Really? How do you intend to do that? Well, I'm gonna go to all the local mosques in my area, and I'm gonna sell this pork, and I'm gonna get rich. The butcher would look at me like I was retarded and say, "You have to be the stupidest person I ever served meat to. You're not gonna make a dime. Don't you know those people don't eat pork, you idiot?" No, you don't understand, man. See, if you bring stuff to a community to defile that community, you'll make a lot of money, because statistics show that if you bring stuff into a community, people don't have a choice but to buy it and take it and destroy themselves. Yeah. You see how that sounds stupid? Just because I bring pork to the mosque doesn't mean the people are going to eat it. Even if I grandize it and make it fly. Look, see how long my beard has grown because I've done this. See how much I love Allah now because I'm eating this pork. It doesn't matter. I can bring out doctors. I can bring out imams from around the area to say, yeah, pork is really all of that, man. Pork makes you stronger. It makes you prettier if you're a woman. It gives you more stamina if you're a man. It does all these different things, and so you need this pork. It doesn't matter what I say. Doesn't matter what I say. No one in the mosque is going to buy my pork, and I'm going to be thrown out of the mosque. Matter of fact, I won't even be allowed to enter into the mosque with that pork. So just because you bring drugs into the Black community, just because you have planted a liquor store on every corner in the Black community, doesn't mean that everyone in the Black community drinks. It doesn't mean that everyone in the Black community takes drugs. So you can miss me with all of that. All right? I know what that's like. I've been there. You haven't. I'm sure the author of this probably grew up middle class and is tricking all of y'all. I know plenty of people that were born poor and lived in the hardest, roughest areas, roughest hoods, that to this day you wouldn't be man or woman enough to walk down the street in daytime. But guess what? They never took drugs, and to this day don't even drink. Just because you live in the hood doesn't mean that you are the hood. You are not where you live. You are an individual. You are not where you live. And to me, that is racist, because now you're saying that all Black people in the jungles of the ghettos, the urban ghettos, are crackheads, alcoholics, and gun-toting gangsters. That is a lie too. Not all Black people in the urban ghetto is ghetto. Not every Black person in the urban ghetto is a gangster or a hoe or whatever, fill in the blank. So that too is racist. All right? Because that's what you are saying. That is basically what you're saying in that quote. That's what you're saying. And then you say bloodsuckers in our community. What you mean when you say that, I'm going to translate this for y'all. What she is saying is that the white man puts up industry in their community that enriches themselves and not the people in the community. Now, I beg to differ, because if you look at the corner stores and stuff in the urban center, a lot of those are people like yourself. You got you may got an African brother that has that little store in the corner, or it could be run by an Asian individual. They could be Chinese, Japanese, they could be Vietnamese, it could be an Indian or whatever stereotype you want to use. Not everybody that owns any type of a store in the urban center is quote unquote a white person. So that too is misleading. How are they bloodsucking in the community? You don't make sense. Bloodsucking means you are taking natural resource from an entity. You're taking something, you're extracting something of value, like a parasite. A parasite is extracting life force from its host. It is extracting something of, and you can't put a price on it. It's invaluable. You can't put a price on it. What valuable is the white man taking from the urban ghetto if he's destroying it with drugs and guns, as you exclaim? There's no good left to take. You can't take blood from them because everybody, according to you, is an alcoholic and a drug addict. Or they're all dead because they're all gangsters shooting each other. So what good is left there to take? It's the urban ghetto. There's no money there, right? It's the ghetto. Wouldn't you just ignore the ghetto and let it stay where it is and not even interact there? Because there's nothing for you to gain there. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make, the premise makes no sense. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Again, all it is blaming someone else for your personal moral failure. You can't blame the white man for your sins. What this 1619 project is attempting to do, ladies and gentlemen, is cast blame on someone else and not taking responsibility for one's own actions. They have to try to attack the past because they have nothing to say about the present. You can't blame the white man for the gangs that you have in the urban city. What's going on in the streets of Chicago with black young men shooting each other has nothing to do with the quote-unquote white man. He ain't had nothing to do with that. He didn't tell that one young black brother to shoot the other black brother. He didn't do that. He's not even there. He doesn't live there. What are you talking about? Just because there are guns in your community doesn't mean you have to shoot each other with them. Just because there are drugs in your community doesn't mean you have to take them. People do what they want to do. It's called personal responsibility. Get some. Take responsibility for your own actions and your own moral failures. The white man is not forcing you to have children out of wedlock, dooming yourself to a life of poverty and struggle. The white man is not forcing you to have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 baby daddies, never married, and you're living in the hood, impoverished. You did that to yourself. You're doing that to yourself. You can't blame the white man. The white man didn't spread your legs open and tell you, now do what I tell you, I'm gonna shoot you. And even if he did, most women in their right mind would have said, well, you just gonna have to shoot me. You do what you want to do, ladies and gentlemen. You do what you want to do. The white man didn't force you to shoot that brother. You shot that brother because he owed you money. You shot that brother because he looked at you twisted. You shot that brother because you was jealous of him. You shot that brother because he stole your girl. You shot that brother because you had to get initiated into joining the gang, or a whole host of other reasons. You liked his new Jordans he had on. You liked his jacket. You wanted his t-shirt, whatever. You wanted the iPhone. You shot that brother because you seen him. You knew he just got the new Xbox that you can't afford. Whatever stupid reason. The white man did not force you to shoot that man. He did not force you to rob that man. The white man did not force you to rape that woman. You did that. The white man did not force you to only have a short-sighted view of the future. You did that. The white man didn't force you to drop out of school. The white man didn't force you not to pay attention in class. The white man didn't force you not to do your homework. The white man didn't force you not to get good grades in school. No, you, young man, young woman, are in control of that. White man has nothing to do with that. And while we're on the subject, how do you explain those individuals who were under such extreme situations of duress only to make it out? You ain't never seen the Antoine Fisher movie? Now, he was having to deal with all types of crazy racism. and he still rose above it. You remember the end of the movie where the dude who was his worst enemy became his biggest supporter. If you ain't seen the Antoine Fisher movie, then maybe you need to go see it, because he dealt with overwhelming odds only to overcome them. Come on now. You saw the movie. And what's that other one? What's the other one with Cuba Gooding Jr., where he was the black diver based on the true story? He went through some stuff and he overcame. So just because you are in a racist environment doesn't mean that you can't elevate above it. You dig what I'm saying to you? You make choices and decisions that ultimately shape the course of your future. No one told you to do that. You told yourself, you convinced yourself that this was the only way. I have to do this. There are so many testimonies of Black young girls and boys that grew up in the urban ghettos only to go on to become doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. All right? How do you explain that? The only way to explain it is to take personal responsibility. You have to admit that they made a different choice. It all comes down to choices. What do you choose to do? You made your choice, and you have to live with your choice. Don't blame the white man or someone else for your moral failures, because thousands of people have come through the urban ghettos at one time or another, only to leave. They don't stay there. They rise above it. So you're saying that every Black person in America is poor and living in the hood, and the only reason why they're still poor and living in the hood is because the white man is keeping them down? Really? 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 Wrong answer. It's a lie, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in a different world, the denunciation of an entire race would be interpreted as not a million miles from racist prejudice. But we live in a world, however, where scripts like the one promoted by the 1619 Project are strongly supported by many of the cultural and educational institutions of society. It is after the New York Times, once the paper of record in the U.S., that promoted and endorsed Hannah Jones's narrative of hate towards the nation's past. And to demonstrate that Hannah Jones enjoyed the moral support of the commemorate, she was awarded the prestigious Pulitzer Prize. Hollywood celebrities rushed in to demonstrate their support for the 1619 Project. Predictably, Oprah Winfrey and the global content platform Lionsgate teamed up with Hannah Jones to bring her to work to an even wider audience through multiple platforms. The embrace of the 1619 Project by celebrities, online influencers, and leaders of America's cultural industrial highlights one of the most important development that encourages the canceling of American culture. The most significant feature of the war against the past is the complicity of cultural institutions and their leaders in the project of estranging society from its traditions and history. It is not merely universities that promote a vision of the nation's past as one that people should view with shame. The claim that contemporary cultural institutions bear the burden of guilt for the crimes committed by their ancestors also seems to have been widely internalized by the cultural elites. According to their playbook, America's history is a story of unremitting violence and greed. There are no good old days that can serve as a focus for redemption and nostalgia. Instead of nostalgia, the current regime promoting a vision of the past as the bad old days incites guilt, shame, and self-loathing. This corrosive orientation towards one's history invites the performance of apology. Now, the ritualization of remorse towards the events of the past is one of the important accomplishments of this movement. It seems that this election is not just about which candidate gets elected, it is ultimately about America's commitment to empirical facts, its extraordinary constitution, and its determination to maintain its leadership role in the world by refusing to allow cheating and corruption in either its elections or its governmental institutions. One can only hope that the ideals of the founding fathers will prevail. But I got to tell you, man, it ain't looking too good right now. It ain't looking too good right now. The real parasites of the urban community is those so-called black leaders like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and those dudes. That's who you really need to be looking at. And Maxine Waters, the one you call auntie. That's where you really need to be looking. But nah, they're not going to do that. I know I stepped on some toes today and made some enemies. Who cares? We need to get back to truth. Truth matters. Facts matter, not distorting facts to spin a narrative of propaganda. Now, is America holy? And do we have a holy and godly government? No. No. No, we don't. But it doesn't mean you get to lie about the past either and make up things that aren't true. We can't stand for that either. You got to speak truth, man. Truth matters. Sorry. You may not like it, but it matters. Truth matters. And as long as the people allow this sort of thing to keep happening, it only gets worse from here. Everything goes downhill from here. And it's sad. We live in a victim culture. Everyone's a victim. Everyone's a victim. No one takes responsibility. No one has personal responsibility. It's always someone else's fault for your moral failures. It's someone else's fault. The devil made me do it. The only reason why I shot that fool is because Donald Trump is an idiot and I hate him. He shouldn't be president. That's why I shot that fool. The only reason why I raped that woman and I was waiting in the bushes for her to come out of the yoga class is because Donald Trump, he's such a racist. That's the only reason why I did that, Your Honor. Well, you know what, young man, I can understand that. You're right. Donald Trump, man, is really just a sore in this world, man. So I understand why you had to shoot that dude and rape that woman, man. I'm gonna let you go, man, because I really feel sorry for you, man. As a matter of fact, can I pray with you before I let you leave the courtroom? Before I exonerate you for the rapage and for the shooting? Before let me pray with you, man. Because Donald Trump, man, I tell you, he's something else, man. You can't use Donald Trump as an excuse to sin, because that's what you're doing. You're blaming other people for your problems. And if you really want to break it down, ladies and gentlemen, all this is the power elite wanting to take more power. Someone is always going to want to rule. No matter what ruler you get, someone's always going to be willing and wanting to rule. Just because one person ruling and people have a problem with and they want to bring someone else doesn't mean the next ruler or the next government is going to be any better. And if history is any barometer, it shows us that things always go from bad to worse. So we can't let the enemies of the country win. Our real enemy is not China. Our real enemy is not Russia. Our real enemy is these Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests and those that fund them, like George Soros and Bill and Melinda Gates and all these other people. They're the ones that need to be brought up on charges of treason. But you can't stop there either. You have to go after all the major Fortune 500 companies that are part of Davos, and you need to lock them up too. So, it's a never-ending thing. There's so many bad actors in this scenario that where do you even begin? You have to follow the money. That's all you really can do at the end of the day is follow the money and root them out that way. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a dude on YouTube, right? So I know I left you with a lot to talk about, and we didn't even scratch the surface. We didn't even get to where I really wanted to get to. I wanted to give you a primer on some stuff, but that'll have to wait for another episode. I really want to talk about the differences of different types of government, and we need to talk about and define in capitalism. We need to talk about that, and we need to break down, the whole, communism versus capitalism and statism and what's really going on and how you have to open your eyes to it. So we're going to get into all of that. But for the most part, just like I said, keep your eyes on the markets, man. If you're not a member of PulseWave Trading, you're playing yourself. You need to go to pulsewavetrading.com and you need to sign up. And we have many, many, many packages. This week is Forex week. And we are offering Forex, free Forex reports this week, all week long, free Forex reports. If you go to pulsewavetrading.com, you can sign up for a free account and you'll have access to those free Forex reports all week long. And put yourself in a situation where you can make some money. Because at the end of the day, man, with all this stuff that's coming, you're going to need to make money more now than ever before. You're going to have to be in a situation to sustain yourself because the government's not going to be able to do it. I know they're promising you that they're going to do it. They're promising you the world right now, but they cannot deliver on these promises. They're not telling you and answering the question, where's the money coming from? If these individuals seize power and get in office, you can kiss prosperity, economic prosperity, goodbye. No one's going to be allowed to prosper. It will be impossible for you to. If you don't believe me, why don't you make a note of it today? Contact your brethren overseas, living in a socialist country, communist country. Ask them how many entrepreneurs they know in those countries. And ask how well those entrepreneurs are doing. You will come out really quickly to know that entrepreneurism is not allowed. It's not allowed in these countries. They make it impossible. Now, there's no outright law against, being an entrepreneur. Of course not. They're not stupid. They just make it impossible for you to do so with all the bureaucracy and red tape. So understand that. You live in a place that allows free enterprise, at least for the time being, and most people are not even taking advantage of it. So once it's taken away, people are going to feel really stupid that they voted for and pushed for this insane regime change. There's an old saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. All right. And what you don't know can actually kill you, not just hurt you. With that being said, remember, bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can and give nothing back. And I am out. Peace.